Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be embarking on a round the world tour in an Airbus A320 Neo. Today's first leg is from my home airport of Newcastle International Airport to Rotterdam in the Netherlands. We're going to be using Navigraph charts to get us where we want to be, and I'm not going to be using any air traffic because I don't really feel that it interacts quite as well as I'd like it to at the moment. So we're going to use the charts. So for those who are unfamiliar with Newcastle International Airport, I'll bring the chart up here. Let's just expand that. Here we are we've just pushed back from the stand, and we are on the dispersal here. We are going to taxi out to runway 25, which is a long taxiway there. And then when we get off the ground, we don't have a departure procedure on this particular flight. I'm using SimBrief for the flight plans, by the way. It's a straight clearance down to EHRD, which is down near the York area. From there we keep on going down the east coast of the United Kingdom, across the North Sea into the Netherlands here, when we will pick up our approach procedures from our arrival at Redfa, where we will then approach the ILS runway 24, which is the runway in use today, for a landing into Rotterdam runway 24. I'm going to talk more about these charts as we need them once we're in the air, and how we're going to use them to get where we want to be. So let's get ourselves off to the runway first, and then we'll continue talking from there. Okay, so here we are lined up on runway 25. Just go through some final checks, make sure everything's in place. Using the checklist here, auto brake to max. Seatbelt signs are on, cabin has been checked, spoilers are armed. Are they? Move out of the way. Yes, spoilers are armed. Flaps are a takeoff configuration. Parking brake is set. TCAS is on standby at present, so we shall bring that up to on. There it is there. That's all sorted, and if we come up on top we can turn on the landing lights, take off on my nose leg. Everything's all set there, everything's looking good. Right, we're all set. Like I say, we're following a flight plan that has been compiled using SimBrief. Incidentally, if you'd like to see me run through how I have set the Airbus up from cold and dark, please let me know in the comments below, and on the next video I'll include that. I haven't included it on this video because there's a lot of videos out there where people go through their own particular way of setting up an aircraft ready for flight, and I just wasn't sure whether you want to sit through another one. But if you are interested in that, then just leave a comment below, and on a future flight, on a future leg of this trip, I will go through how I set the aircraft up from cold and dark. Anyway, here we are now, ready for takeoff. So we're going to be using flex takeoff. It's all set up for that. So parking brake released. Up to full power. Back to flex, off the toe brakes, and we're moving. 60 knots. $100 knots. V1 rotates. 15 degrees nose up. Positive rate. Gears coming up. Let's just control that pitch. Flying manually for the first few moments before we'll get the autopilot engaged, before our first left hand turn, and we head south. 200 knots, flaps up, autopilot engaged. Climb power. It's a cloudy day in Newcastle today. So we'll be getting our first turn to the south, and as I said earlier, we do on this flight plan have direct clearance to EGNT, which is near the York area, so there is no departure procedure to follow. Straight into some cloud, however. .250 knots, climbing up through 5,000 feet. There's the River Tyne just below us there. And we've broke through the tops already into the blue sky. Okay, we're through transition, which was 6,000 feet, so I can switch now to standard pressure. Stop that from flashing. Holding 250 knots, coming through 8,000 feet. Let's do a bit of tidy up. We can unarm the spoilers. Keep the land lights on for another 1,500 feet till we get to 10,000 feet. Okay, through 10,000 feet, so we can get our landing lights retracted. Keep our seatbelt signs on for a little longer. And as we're above 10,000 feet, as you can see, we are now clear to accelerate. If I move the range out on the map display there now, you can see EGNT up ahead there. It's about 60 nautical miles away. Top of the climb for flight level 350, which I should have mentioned before. That's our climb, our cruise altitude for today. Is a little bit beyond EGNT, so that's all looking good. If I show you our map, here we are, just departed Newcastle upon Tyne, and we are flying down towards EGNT, where we will intercept our flight plan, our track. So that's looking good so far. Okay, so with us approaching 19,000 feet on the way up to our cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, flight level 350. Little check on things. We are closing in on EGNT, which is just over 40 nautical miles away. Our top of climb is a little bit beyond that, but we're on track with that, holding 290 knots. I think we can get the seatbelt signs off now, let people move around in the cabin behind, so we'll turn that off. Just check all the lights are configured as they should be. That's all looking good. And if we just take a quick look at our flight plan, just make sure that as we approach, there's no discontinuities, things like that. I did check before taking off, but we'll just double check that anyway. There's our arrival at Redfar. Then beyond that is Massos, and then Doffmo. That's the start of our approach section. There's our decelerations, our speeds. When we get closer to it, it's all in place, ready for the runway at runway 24. That looks good. It'll populate the ILS frequencies as we get nearer the time. Okay, that's all looking good. Let's check on our map for progress. Here we are now, just passing Teesside on the way down to EGNT, but as I said before, it's quite close to York. There's York there. Everything looking good. Okay, so we've just arrived at our cruising altitude of flight level 350. We still have to the top of descent around about 90 nautical miles, something like that. So we have a little bit of time to talk about our next procedures. If I bring in Navigraph, here we are here, just approaching Eshen. We're just past the Humber estuary, just there, still passing down the east coast of the UK. The next event we're going to have to deal with is our arrival procedure into Redfar. The first restriction or target we need to be hitting is the waypoint of Massos, which says that we have to be below flight level 60, so less than 6,000 feet. So when we begin our descent, we'll set a target of 6,000 feet, and that is pretty much the only restriction that we have to deal with on the way in there. So that's a quite straightforward one. When we arrive there, we can then start setting up for our ILS. Runway 24, the Yankee approach. So there's our Massos there, and then as we come into Dofmu, which is our arrival, we then enter this pattern here in for runway 24. Things we have to be aware of here: at Kako we have a mandatory 3,000 feet, so we were at 6,000 feet, we're going to descend towards 3,000 feet, and then into Rovox, which is a maximum of 3,000 feet, minimum 2,500 feet. So we'll probably descend to 3,000, then descend down to 2,500, where we will turn 90 degrees to the left in towards the localizer, which is RD241. And that, if you come down here, RD241 is 1,500 feet, which we will hold to RD242, where we will intercept the glide slope and come into runway 24. Easy as that. So 6,000 down to 3,000, down to 2,500, down to 1,500, intercept the glide slope, and we are in. Simple as that, eh? So let's just get back to where we were here. Just past the Humber Estuary, it's Grimsby, and we're heading down towards the Wash. So that's basically going to be what we need to be dealing with as we get a little closer. Now we do have a bit of a cloud bank up ahead. Let's find out what's going on there. If I switch the weather on, we are at flight level 350, and we're heading into a bit of cloud here. So it thins out. Well, by the time we descend, it's going to be cleared off anyway. So yes, we do have a bit of cloud up ahead to deal with, but shouldn't be too much to worry about. Right, so bit of time yet before descent, so sit back and enjoy the cruise. So we are rapidly arriving at our top of descent. We have just passed the waypoint of Dolas as we're just passing over East Anglia. There's Redford there, that's our arrival point. So we need to start considering getting ourselves ready for descent, targeting 6,000 feet. So that was the reminder, and we are about 50 nautical miles from top of descent. Okay, so let's bring our altitude selector down to 6,000 feet, and there it is there, and select. And there's the descent starting to happen there now, and we have our speed window for the descent there as well. We'll switch on our constraints on the display to remind us of our constraints as we get closer, but there is no constraints until we get to Massos, which is 6,000 feet, flight level 60. So a little bit of time to go yet, but we are on our way. So we're now heading out over the North Sea, descending to flight level 320 on the way down to flight level 60, holding about 280 knots. You can see on our display here, that's our next deceleration point there, that little pink circle there, which will get us ready for 10,000 feet, which is 250 knots. You can see our constraint there at Massos for flight level 60, and our descent profile, which is this green dot here, is fine. We should be at 6,000 at the current rate. We should be at 6,000 feet before we reach that constraint. There we are, leaving the coast of England just behind us as we head out over the North Sea. You can see on the display also that the top of the descent for what we have selected so far, 6,000 feet, is round about Massos, so we're bang on track there. You can see the green dot, which is the descent profile, is pretty much in the right area, so not looking too bad there. So in terms of altitude, we can switch soon to the actual air pressure for the arrival point, and just to remind us, the arrival into Rotterdam has air pressure of 1010 millibars, which we will set as we get closer to it. You can see now our descent profile is bang on there, and our top of descent is right at Massos. So here we are arriving into Redfer, which is our arrival point, as we then prepare for arrival into Massos, flight level 60. So I see a bank of cloud up ahead. Let's just check on that. Bring up our weather. There it is. So when we arrive at flight level 60, well, on the way down to it, there's some thick cloud coming up ahead around about 20,000 feet, which is pretty much where we are now. But if we bring this down to flight level 60 and see what's like at Massos, that's thin cloud. That'll be fine. No real problems with that. So coming down through towards 24,000 feet on the way down to 6,000 feet. Descent profile is bang on. Slap bang in the middle of our speed window. Now what I've found with this is the fly-by-wire A320 is when the descent area, we're bang on profile here, but when we get to this pink dot here, which is just short of 40 nautical miles away, we're going to need to decelerate down towards 250 knots. Now we are currently at idle, which means that we can't reduce engine power to slow down. So the only way we can actually reduce our airspeed is for the aircraft to pitch, or reduce the pitch down attitude, reduce the rate of descent, in other words, which means we might then push out how long it would take to get down to 6,000 feet. So I am fully expecting when we reach this pink dot and the speed window reduces to 250 knots, I may have to deploy some spoilers, because that is our only other way of reducing our airspeed, to introduce some drag. But we'll see what happens when we get there. Let's bring the range in a little bit. So 30 nautical miles out is our deceleration point. But we are currently bang on our descent profile here to arrive at Massos at 6,000 feet. So as you can see, we're turning because we have arrived at Redfa and we're now heading in towards Massos. We are on the Redfa 3 Romeo arrival procedure. Dropping down through 20,000 feet. I'm going to now select pressure and remind myself, what was it again? It was 1010 millibars. So that's us now set for the air pressure at Rotterdam. Coming down through 18,000 feet. I'm going to pop the seatbelt signs on, get everybody strapped in. Okay, so we're quick coming up on our deceleration point, and Massos is now 25-26 nautical miles away. 13,000 feet descending for 6,000 feet, and like I said earlier, I'm expecting when we have our change of speed window, I may need to deploy some spoilers to keep that 6,000 feet target at Massos, because if the aircraft pulls its nose up to reduce the rate of descent, that bottom of the descent is going to push beyond Massos and we will be in breach of our arrival procedure. You see the Dutch coast out in front there. It's getting close. Dropping down through 11,000 feet on the way down to 10,000, where we will put on our landing lights. Okay, arriving at the deceleration point, so we're checking on our speed window here. That'll drop for a target of 250 knots, which we need for 10,000 feet. That's the speed limit. There it is, that's just changed. Now what's the rate of, see the rate of descent? It's decreasing, which means that's going to push out, which means I need to get the spoilers out. Now that has resulted in the speed coming down, and we're still on a little slightly dropping below the descent profile, but we'll see what happens when we get into that new speed window. Approaching 10,000 feet. Landing lights come on. Almost into that speed window. That's it, 250 knots, so that satisfies the speed limit for flying below 10,000 feet. Bring the spoilers in and let the aircraft settle down at that. So what's that done to our descent? Right, our rate of, or should I say our bottom of descent is now, it's perhaps a little smidgen beyond. Oh, we're on profile. That's kind of worked. Although our speed is picking up a little bit, it needs to bring that back down. Right, 6,000 feet, but then when we arrive into the ILS procedure, our next point to be aware of is 3,000 feet by CACO. So because we're held in a constraint at 6,000 feet, I'm going to select 3,000 feet now. So it is there, but it won't drop below 6,000 feet until we have passed Massos, so I can't accidentally drop too much altitude too soon, so that should work out quite fine. You can see now there's DOFMU there. That's the start of our ILS procedure. Speed is pretty much in the area. Its descent profile should be at Massos for 6,000 feet. As you can see, Massos is just before the coastline. And as you can see out the front window, our coastline is just there. So we are arriving at Massos right about here-ish. So Massos, target of 6,000 feet. Are we going to make it? We might not, you know. This is a fly-by-wire A320. You know, it is good, especially for a freeware bit of kit. But it does lack a little bit if I put the spoilers out, it just lifts the engines up. But we're roughly there. It's flight simulation. So Massos, 1 nautical mile away, 7,000 feet. You know what? We're in the 6,000s. That's good enough for me. Okay, so turning towards Duffmu, which is that point there, and that is the start of our arrival procedure into Rotterdam, runway 24. Okay, so heading down towards 3,000 feet is our next mandatory altitude by Kako, which is beyond Duffmu. There's Kako there, in amongst all that muddle. As we get close, I will expand that out so we can read it a bit clearer. Looks like quite a nice day in Rotterdam, or in the Netherlands. There's a bit of broken cloud, sunny day in any other way. It's quite nice. Okay, coming down through 5,500 feet. Landing lights are on, strobes are auto, beacons on, that looks good. Seatbelt signs are on. Okay, just checking our speeds. 250, 250. As we come down, Rovox, it drops to 190. That's our arrivals procedures. 190, 190, 149. Arriving in at 131 knots. Check our RadNav. Yep, it's populated with our ILS information, so if we put on our ILS display there now, even though we're going to go beyond the airfield to turn around and come back in, so it's not an accurate distance to go yet. Holding 250 knots, 5,000 feet, bang on descent profile for 3,000 feet. Heading in towards Duffmu, which is around about 12 nautical miles out. And a reminder, Duffmu is the beginning of our arrivals procedure. Or ILS procedure, should I say. Okay, everything's looking good. Okay, so we're getting very close to Duffmu now. There's our aircraft being tracked along that line there now into Duffmu. In terms of clouds on the final approach, let's just have a look at what... So there's our runway just there. So if I bring down our flight level to 3,000, down to 1,000, it may be just a little bit of light cloud, but nothing too significant. We should have a good view of the runway on the final approach. Okay, approaching Duffmu, ready for our left-hand turn in towards Kako, which has our mandatory altitude of 3,000 feet. Cloud is a little bit thicker at this altitude, but I think we're going to drop below that as we descend towards 3,000. You see a few breaks in the cloud up ahead. Here's our left-hand turn. There's Kako up ahead with a restriction of 3,000, beyond that 2,500, and there's the 1,500. So with that in mind, as we are descending towards 3,000 under a constraint, I'm going to drop this to 2,500, which is our next. In fact, if I just drop that to 1,500 now, it's not going to allow me to descend. It shouldn't allow me to descend below 2,500 at Rovox, which is there, because of the constraints. So that can have my altitude, autopilot altitude setting set. So it's done now and out of the way. I'm going to be messing around with that when I'm entering the final few stages. Okay, so where are we? Caco, 10 nautical miles out. Descending for 3,000 feet, which is what we want. Holding about 250 knots. Now I think these asterisks here against the speed is for the approach phase. So I'll activate the approach phase when we get to Rovox. Or as we're approaching Rovox. So once we go beyond Caco, I'll engage or activate the approach phase for control of the speed on the way in. Now I'm dropping through a bit of cloud here now. Hopefully that'll get out the way quite soon. We'll just range in there a little bit. The runway, we would be able to see it. It would be off to our left, but it's in cloud. Okay, we're approaching our 3,000 foot altitude for Caco. In rather thick cloud. I hope we drop out of this quite soon. Navigraph seemed to suggest that we would. Now, very close to 3,000 feet there now. Altitude pressure is set. We're clearing that bank of cloud there, which is good. Welcome to Rotterdam. There it is there. I think we'll probably drop below this cloud in another 500 feet or so. So there's Caco, so we're now going to descend to 2,500 feet. I will activate my approach phase. Activate, confirm. And there's our 2,500 foot target now coming into play. Speed is decelerating. First target for flaps 1 will be at 200 knots. Okay, now we're at the business end. Here we are there on our path into Rovox. Left hand turn coming up. Speed reducing. See the glide slope coming up. Here's our turn. Approaching 210 knots. Descending now for 1,500 feet. Okay, flaps 1.
2,500.
Okay, we're below the glide slope, which is what we want, ready for the intercept point. We're going to be holding 1,500 feet on the, as we line up with the localizer, ready for the glide slope to come down to meet us. Flaps 2. (2,200 feet). Speed still coming down. We're just at the base of the clouds there, aren't we? Okay, dropping down to 160 knots. Flaps 3, spoilers armed. It's 2,000 feet. I did want 1,500, but we're below the glide slope, that's alright. Okay, turning in now. So I'm going to engage approach phase, autopilot 2. So when we get lined up with the localizer here, it'll hold that steady until the glide slope comes down to meet us. 6 miles out, gear coming down. Okay. Full flaps. Runway in sight. Localizer is in. There it is. Glide slope's coming down. 130 knots. 1,500 feet, which is what we want to intercept. So we reached that. That was good. So there's our glide slope coming in and captured. And descending down the glide slope there now. Dropping towards 130 feet. When we get to 1,000 feet, I will disengage the autopilot and hand fly this baby home. So, landing gears down, 3 green, seatbelt signs are on, cabins checked, spoilers are on, flaps are at full, landing lights are on. Here we go. We have dropped below the cloud base as I hoped we would, so we've got a good view all the way in.
1,000.
Autopilot coming out. Hand flying, although speed is still held by the autopilot. Wind is right on the nose, straight ahead, 243 degrees and at 14 knots. Still shouldn't be too much of a side wind component. 130 knots, holding steady on the glide slope, on the localizer. Dropping below the glide slope just a little bit. Poppies look good.
400.
Get that centre line tracked in. Come on. Looking good.
100 above. Minimum.
Okay, over the threshold. Idle.
50, 40,
Flare.
30, 20, 10, 5.
Thrust reverse. Onto the brakes. Thrust reverse out. Here we are, welcome to Rotterdam. Flaps up. Spoilers in. And taxi off. Okay, what we'll just do now, as I'm by myself, no co-pilot, just pause the aircraft there for a second to get the landing lights off, taxi light on, taxi when we turn off on, beacons, that's fine, the strobes are auto, right? Okay, so let's taxi in. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. That's the first leg complete of my round the world trip in an Airbus A320 Neo. Each of the flights I plan to do will be of similar length, around about an hour, which of course in the end I can shorten down a little bit. But we work our way west, we work our way east. And And I don't yet know exactly where we're going to end up going, but I want to try and go to countries and airports that I've never been before. Perhaps many of you may never have been before, so I'll always fly in real time, in other words the local time and local weather. We might get some challenges on the way around. And as we're passing Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, we should get some interesting weather conditions. We'll stick it in here as I seem to have all the ground equipment already set up for me. I know my taxi lights are still on, I'm blind in the marshaller. But again, I don't have a co-pilot to do these things for me. You know, I used to marshal myself in the Air Force. It's not normally a good thing when you have an aircraft taxiing in and they left the taxi lights on. Not that I've ever left them on very often, but there you go. Follow that marshaller. Let's not run over him. And stop. Brakes on.